They are dignified representatives of the Democratic and Republican campaigns. So what's making them so angry?
People are being thrown out of work here in the United States because the Bush administration is using taxpayer dollars to recruit companies to relocate. And today, when George Bush was in Nashville,
no president would take jobs away from his people. I mean, that just makes no sense at all. And in fact,
I agree it doesn't make sense, but he's doing it.
The issue is jobs and the program that has encouraged employers to take them overseas, with American taxpayers picking up the tab. Tonight, a debate with no ground rules. Labor Secretary Lynn Martin versus Democratic vice presidential candidate Al Gore.
This is ABC News Nightline. Reporting from Washington, Ted Koppel.
Last night, in some depth, we showed you 3 reports by Nightline correspondent Dave Marish. U.S. tax dollars, he reported, are being used to lure American businesses, especially in the textile industry, overseas. Marish and producer Leroy Sievers documented some of what the National Labor Committee had told us was going on. The committee is a coalition of 21 American unions, which has been investigating the drain of American jobs into the Caribbean basin. The Agency for International Development, which was in part set up to help bring business to regions like Central America, is doing its job only too successfully, at the cost, Marish reported last night, of a huge number of jobs here in the United States.
Well, this plant had always had the reputation of being one of the highest quality plants that they ever had.
In today's global economy, simply excelling at your work isn't enough to save your job.
They will never have the quality that was turned out in Princeton. Never.
Excellence didn't save 115 jobs lost last March when Maidenform closed its sewing plant in Princeton, West Virginia. Maidenform's last sewing plant in the continental United States.
They are efficient. They are loyal. They are quality workers. But every garment they sewed, this company lost money on.
To put it in economics everyone can understand, in West Virginia,
if you sewed minimum, you made $5.10 an hour.
While in Guatemala,
let's say you're going to pay good salaries, you can pay 90 cents an hour.
On the global market, at an apparel industry convention, 90 cents an hour is the top bid for factory labor given to our hidden camera. It is quickly undercut.
So let's say we're talking about 80 cents. You will be safe if you figure 70 cents fully loaded.
Today, Maidenform bras are sewn here in Honduras and in Jamaica, Mexico, and Costa Rica. At the Zip Choloma Industrial Park, Maidenform has settled in alongside such familiar American brand names as Hanes, Bestform, and Flexis. Anyone else wanting to follow this path, taking American jobs offshore, would find his way paved with your tax dollars, courtesy the U.S. Agency for International Development.
USAID pays for part of our budget on the Export Council, okay, which actually almost pays for this booth.
Under and apparel factories produce...
USAID also pays for promotional videotapes and subsidized tours and the whole job creation program in at least 11 countries in the Caribbean and Central America. USAID pays to train young factory workers, and USAID is creating special banks specifically to finance these relocations of thousands of American jobs offshore. The program works.
We're creating jobs, okay? In the last 2.5 to 3 years, we've created, within all the parks, more than 20,000 employees.
But even in Honduras, they're aware the program may be working to some Americans' disadvantage.
How do I explain to these people in the U.S. who are losing jobs? Well, I believe that it's the responsibility of the U.S. government as well as the private sector to retrain these people.
In Princeton, some of the $108 million spent for worker retraining in the last 2 years under the Trade Adjustment Assistance Act is sending Patty Davis to business school. Still, without maiden form, she faces an uncertain future.
I do live off my unemployment, but that's going to expire here in October. What we do after that, I don't have any idea.
We do not accept that the gain in jobs in the Caribbean basin is at the loss of jobs in the United States.
That's the generic position at AID. And when it comes specifically to people like Patricia Davis,
what we say is it's very unfortunate, and there are programs of adjustment assistance, and they should be helped.
Moments later, 18 minutes into our interview, we were abruptly cut off by an AID information officer who blocked the camera.
I mean, we're asking for 5 more minutes.
Gentlemen, the interview's over.
When we come back, we employ two of the leading voices from the presidential campaign for opposing views on the flight of jobs. Labor Secretary Lynn Martin and the Democratic vice presidential candidate, Al Gore.
This is ABC News Nightline.
Lynn Martin has been Labor Secretary for the last year and a half, and more recently, she has also been a frequent spokesperson for the Bush Quayle campaign. She joins us now from our Washington bureau. The Clinton-Gore campaign has been hitting hard on the program that is sending jobs to Central America and the Caribbean. The Democrats' vice presidential candidate, Al Gore, joins us now from Arlington, Virginia. Secretary Martin, let me give you the first crack and pick up anywhere you like, because we've just done a fairly long takeout on what is clearly a controversial program.
Right. Well, just let's get a few things straight. First of all, it is a rum way to act, to do an interview and walk in front of cameras, and even if you're trying to say the right things, that looks dopey. So let's sort of try to take that out for a moment and talk about jobs and about the things that do matter for Americans. First, we do believe that 22,000 jobs were created in the industry, but that doesn't mean they're the same jobs. What was, I won't say inaccurate, but perhaps not complete in the piece, is it is important that there be job training. We agree with that. And so that's why through the Congress, it's a joint effort, Republicans and Democrats, we spend about $1.3 billion in that 2-year period on job training for people who lose their work, and that's why the President has also suggested an increase. We're talking about $10 billion over the next 10 years. So I couldn't agree more. If we don't retrain and train people for work, then I think we lose an enormous asset. But you cannot shut the door. I guess I probably, when I was in Congress, I probably didn't vote for a lot of those programs bluntly, because I think it does bother people. And maybe we'll have an odd situation, because I know Senator Gore did vote for the CBI and all of the funding. If anyone in AID is doing what they shouldn't do under the law, I'm not going to stand up and say that's right, neither is Senator Gore. But unlike the Singapores, the Taiwans, the Koreas, when there are jobs in Honduras, in Costa Rica, in Mexico, that does benefit us because they buy from us. In every one of those countries you mentioned, there's a positive balance of payments. That means more American jobs here than there, and that is a positive sign.
Let me, I don't want to pick up too much on what you said, because I don't want the two of us to get into a debate here, but let me just tell you that when we have researched it very carefully, and we've researched it not only with your own Labor Department, but also with the Congressional Budget Office and the Office of Management and Budget, and as far as we can tell, slightly more than $100 million has been allocated for the retraining of jobs that have gone overseas. Well, and we've spent the past 2 days talking to your folks at the Labor Department who haven't been able to tell us differently.
Well, I can, though. And one of the things you didn't count is the fact that, that there is, in this particular program, there are 2 different programs. One's trade adjustment, and the other is one of those big, long things called EDWA. Trade adjustment not only pays for training, it pays for maintenance of people while they're getting work, so that you never added that cost. In other words, we pay for the food, the rent, and that's an additional dollars. The EDWA program, which may help people who have lost their jobs because of a loss of a job that went to a foreign country, also has to be added in that. So it wasn't a deliberate mistake on your part. It's just that there are other programs helping people that you didn't add on.
All right, I'm not even prepared to accept that it was a mistake at all, but I'm going to let Senator Gore come in here now, because he was shaking his head vigorously before when you said that he had supported the Caribbean Basin Initiative.
Yeah, that's a minor point. In fact, I voted against the Caribbean Basin Initiative when it was created. I thought it was a mistake then. I think it's a mistake now. And Lynn Martin also voted against it, and I hope not just because she was afraid people would be unhappy about it, but because she felt it was the wrong thing to do. It was the wrong thing then, and it's the wrong thing now, because it's an outrage to force U.S. taxpayers to have their money used to actively encourage U.S. factories to shut down here at home, throw Americans out of work, and then take the whole factory lock, stock, and barrel to a foreign country where the retraining of the people to take those jobs away from U.S. citizens is subsidized again by the U.S. taxpayers. The products are then brought back in with favorable treatment and tax subsidies, so that you have the Bush administration opposing activist policies to create jobs here at home, but supporting an industrial policy for other countries to steal jobs from the United States and take them overseas. It is an absolute outrage.
Well, it would be if that were true, Al.
That's what's happening.
But as you know, and just for a moment, I think we should clarify, we're talking about AID here. And certainly you've been supportive of that. The program you're just saying, oh my heavens, how terrible, you happen to have voted for. But that's not even,
Madam Secretary, you're wrong about that. You're wrong about that.
You are
I
saying
voted against it, and you voted against it because
you have
it's
never
wrong.
voted for AID and for the appropriations for AID?
I voted against the Caribbean Basin Initiative, and the way the Bush administration is handling this program is an outrage. Don't tell me about it. There was a factory in Decaturville, Tennessee that was shut down because the Bush administration financed people to come in and tell the factory owner that even though he was making a good, healthy profit, one of the most profitable companies in the entire corporation, that he ought to shut it down, throw the people out of work, and take it to the Caribbean.
Just
now, listen,
a minute. No one would ever come in and say, if anyone from the administration, if you're suggesting that, and I'm saying here, they have a picture or they have a program that talks about someone from AID, which you did support, coming in and saying that person should be out. We all agree with that. But let us talk about how we do create jobs. When you voted, for instance...
In this country or in other countries?
In this country. And when they're created in other countries, when you voted for the fast track, for instance, for NAFTA, it was because you believed and hoped that we could get the kind of agreement that when these countries can buy from us, that we produce more jobs. Remember when they talked about the Maidenform Plan and they talked about $5 an hour? Well, export-related jobs happen to make about 17% more than non-related export jobs. If we can do better with exports, and indeed in Mexico we've doubled over the last 3 years, we can have more jobs for American people. And in a world that is continually growing, we must prepare our people to have it. That's why, and I know you would support this, Al, the new training initiatives. That's the point of this show. Let's make sure American workers can have jobs and can be trained for better jobs.
Excuse me, but that is not the point of this show. You can dance around this and talk fast and try to get a lot of points in that are irrelevant to the main point. But the fact is that people are being thrown out of work here in the United States because the Bush administration is using taxpayer dollars to recruit companies to relocate. And today, when George Bush was in Nashville, the people who were thrown out of work in Decaturville, Tennessee, tried to have a conversation with him, wrote him a letter, wanted to talk with him. He refused to even see them. He is in favor of the people who own these factories, and he wants to help them get the lowest possible labor rates.
May I just one small question?
May I just jump? Let me just jump in for one moment. No, well, you know, I mean, you were doing such a nice job with it. Let me just have a moment so that we can make a little bit of money, and then when we come back, Lynn Martin, you will ask a question of Al Gore. We'll continue our discussion in a moment. And we're back once again with Senator Al Gore and Secretary of Labor Lynn Martin. Secretary Martin, you were about to ask Senator Gore a question.
I was going to say, so we know that we're both talking about the same thing. You'd be talking about, Al, if someone said, hey, come and do business where I'm located because we can make sure there aren't unions. We can make sure there are lower wages. We can make sure we give you tax breaks. That's not the kind of thing you would support, right?
Well, listen.
Is that correct?
That's exactly what George Bush is doing in this program.
Well, but
they are even
you and I would agree
with the people who run this program to tell them that anybody who looks like they're going to agitate for higher wages than 50 cents an hour will be immediately fired and blacklisted.
And that is, let me tell you, Al, that's absolutely wrong, and that's why I asked the question. No, wait.
Your officials
are doing that. There are officials, first of all. You know AID are professional people. Those aren't political people.
You're paying them.
And you are, too, as a member of the Senate when you voted for AID. But what I just said, and you and I know, which is why you were waltzing around it, is exactly what the state of Arkansas did under Bill Clinton to take jobs away from West Virginia, from Wisconsin, from Illinois, and from other organized and union states.
Listen.
Your senior candidate, not George Bush, was part of that brochure. I find that offensive, too. The question is here not, should we do it? The answer to that is no. And if it's an AID official doing it, that should be stopped. And I hope you'd agree.
Can I address
if it's your candidate, he shouldn't have done that.
Before we lose all the time altogether, let me see if I understand correctly what Lynn Martin has been saying. You're saying if indeed those aid dollars are going to lure American jobs overseas, that should stop?
In ways where you are suggesting that you come there to take an American job, that you use that tax money not to, that's what AID is for, to help produce incomes in other nations so they can be a better part of America. But if it's done in the wrong way, the person responsible for that, of course, there should be general agreement that it follows certain rules, and the administration has indeed said the same thing.
This is not a question of whether or not we want to have friendly relations with Latin America or to have sensible programs that make it possible for them to grow economically. That's not the question that is involved here. Nor is it a question of one state having an industrial development policy compared to another state. This is a question of the Bush administration taking U.S. tax dollars to actively encourage factories here to shut their doors, throw their employees out of work, and relocate into foreign countries on the promise of getting the cheapest possible wages, working with them to blacklist anybody who wants to organize, to bargain collectively, or to have higher wages there. This is an absolute outrage, and it stands in sharp contrast. His willingness and eagerness to help relocate these factories overseas stands in sharp contrast to his absolutely fierce opposition to any program here in the United States to create jobs for our own people. In fact, there are fewer jobs in the private sector in the United States today than there were 4 years ago when Bush and Quayle took over, and that's the first time that's happened since Herbert Hoover's administration.
Even in a campaign,
and this program is one of the reasons why it's happening.
Now, no president, I will tell you this, no president, and you and I know it. I mean, as soon as you hear this, although for a moment you think, oh my goodness, could this be true? No president.
It is true.
No, it is not. No president would take jobs away from his people. I mean, that just makes no sense at all. And in fact,
I agree, it doesn't make sense, but he's doing it.
And the job producing, Al, that we have tried to do, and everything from changing investment policy to the new $10 billion job training is still stuck in the charm and the joy of the Senate, where I hope you're able to finish out your term and help us pass it, because we desperately need new jobs, new investments in America.
We're drifting just a little bit away from our main focus tonight.
I guess it happens, Ted, in a political year, right?
I guess it does, and the two of you have shown great expertise in making my job irrelevant, because you don't need a moderator. But just let me interrupt long enough to thank you both. I'm not sure that we have reached any kind of conclusion here.
I have.
Well, I'll tell you what, if each of you could just take 30 seconds then to address, because I'd like to put it in the form just of a question to you, Lynn Martin.
Surely.
I agree with you. I can't imagine any American president deliberately setting out to cost American workers jobs. But I can see that kind of thing happening by inadvertence. I can see what looks like a good program in isolation, the AID program, having that end result whether it was intended or not. And I must tell you, based on the reporting that our people have done over the last few weeks, that in reality is what is happening.
Quickly in that 30 seconds, the AID program may well need review, although that's not an area of my expertise. The administration has asked to relook at it and to put some additional controls so we can make sure that any individual behaving in a way that would deliberately cost American jobs would be wrong. What we are and what we must be is a huge export power. And what the Bush administration is trying to do is to make sure we are able to increase exports because they do produce American jobs and they produce better American jobs. That is also why I think, quite importantly, as your show did talk about, we have to be very sure about training and retraining when there is any dislocation. And I must say that that $10 billion program that we're suggesting, that I think will have bipartisan support, by the way, that isn't Republican or Democrat, is the least we can do for our fellow citizens. We have to have those exports, we have to have those increases, but anyone who gets hurt in this time of change, while we're trying to create new jobs, should be helped.
Secretary Martin, your 30 seconds were up about 30 seconds ago. Senator Gore, go ahead.
Well, George Bush, as everybody knows, has always been more interested in the rest of the world than he has been in the people of this country. The only time he starts talking about American jobs is when his job is in jeopardy. He went down to the Carolinas and was asked about this, the impact on the textile program, and he said, "C'est la vie." Even his language was imported. And unless I miss my guess, this kind of evidence is going to further convince the American people to say to him, "Hasta la vista," because we can't stand 4 more years of what we've had.
And a hearty Dankeschön to you both. Thank you very much, Lynn Martin.
I'll try
Gore.
good night. I'm the Secretary of Labor. I speak English.
All right, I'll be back in a moment.
Taxes, health care, and crime. Governor Clinton faces those issues and the debate over the debate.
Also, women and welfare, the real story on the next Good Morning America.
That's our report for tonight. I'm Ted Koppel in Washington. For all of us here at ABC News, good night.
If you wish a videocassette version of Nightline, the cost is $14.98 plus $3.95 shipping and handling.
Is a presentation of ABC News. More Americans get their news from ABC News than from any other source.